Let's see. Someone tell me if you're here so I can see if those little messages pop up again just to make sure. Great, got it. Thank you. Perfect. Great. So if that happens, you'll know. I will be right back, and it looks like it leaves us. It lets us leave. It leaves off wherever we were. So this is where I was, just to show you. You know, you might pick a kind of brownish color in here. You also, if you've got the color picker open, yeah, I was going to do that. You can also change values of colors. So you could take, let's say you want to go for like a really bright, a bright red, a super, super bright red. You could go get a really bright red, and notice that bright red is 0 cyan, practically 100 magenta, 100 yellow, and 0 K is black. So cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So you can also sort of work with these percentages if you wanted to in the color picker. Not something that you necessarily have to do, but it's just there and it's possible, and I like you to know what's possible. So I'm going to choose some kind of color over here and press OK, and you'll see that my fill is going to accept that color inside the rectangle. And then I'm going to look at my stroke. Now the stroke is the outline, so I think, you know, if you were wondering about why there might or might not be outlines, the default might be to have a black outline. So this time, instead of the color picker, I'm going to work over here with the color panel. So you may have had black outlines around all of your shapes. And if you just select your rectangle, and then instead of having black, you can use no outline, that will turn the stroke off. So if you have a whole bunch of strokes, or we can just call them outlines, on your shapes, you can go one at a time to each of your shapes and just turn the outline to no. You have to pull the stroke icon forward in order to tell it no stroke, right? If my fill chip was forward and I said no, then I would have no fill and no stroke. I also want to show you, you know, you could continue to make a bunch of rectangles, or with your selection tool, and so this will be a selection tool on the Mac with the Option key. On the PC, the same thing achieved with the Alt key. Notice that my selection tool turns into a double arrow when I hold that key down. So for me, it's an Option key. I'm going to Option key and then drag, click and drag. And what I've just done is I've made a copy. So the selection tool plus the Alt key, or the Option key, sorry, Option for Mac, Alt for PC, and then a click and drag will make copies. So I think it would be easier to do this by just making really one rectangle and then using your Option or your Alt key, clicking and dragging to make all the rest of them. And then you can, you know, rotate them and resize them and color them at will. You can also use, and just a couple more things to show you, you can also use this color area. Now this part of the color area shows you, again, that color spectrum, just like what you would see in the color picker, which we accessed over here by double clicking on the fill color. You can also see, if I'm going to turn on from this little tiny pull down menu in the top right corner, show options. Let me do that one more time just so you can see where I am. So I have the color, you know, by default that color panel pops out when you're working with your fill color. If it didn't, it's right here. So I would press my little color icon, and then this top right submenu inside the panel, if I click that, I'm going to do show options. And show options shows me what I personally am used to seeing, which is basically the Adobe Creative Suite 5 or 5.5 version of the color panel. In Adobe 6, by default, the options are hidden, so we just have the spectrum to work with. I sort of like to see the options. I like to see my percentages, because there's a lot of times where I feel like I specifically want to work with some percent of some color and like 0 on everything else. Or let's say I wanted to work with exactly 20% black or 20% gray. Right? This is a really easy way to make sure that I'm doing that. That's not something that necessarily comes into play kind of really specifically for this project, but if you do work for print or for the web and you need to match a color, it's really nice to be able to use those percentages. So I think it's important to know where those are and how to use them. Again, I could use the same deal over here. So I could draw or copy. Let's do that same copy deal. So I'm going to hold Option and click and drag. I could copy a rectangle. I could change, rotate it by putting my cursor outside with the selection tool and click and drag to resize my rectangle. So I could work down here in my tool panel, or if I've got my color panel open, I could also work over here. So I could change what the fill looks like, and then I could bring the stroke to the forefront. If I wanted a stroke, I could choose a stroke. And I could even choose the stroke weight, making a really thick outline if I wanted that. I actually don't want any outlines on this particular exercise, so I'm going to turn that off. Okay. So you're going to have a bunch of paths. You can see in my layer panel I have all these paths that are building. At some point you'll want to move the paths so that they overlap in the way that you meant for them to overlap. So there's a few ways to do that. You can take any path, like this pink one that's kind of on top, and you can choose Object Arrange, and then you can either choose, in this case I'm going to go backwards, so I could either do Send Backwards or Send to Back. Send Backwards sends it back one level, and you can see there's a hotkey. So the hotkey for Send Backwards on my Mac is Command Open Bracket. So I could press Command Open Bracket if I wanted to. Now, I can see on my layer panel, let me press Command Z so you can see, and then Command Z so you can see, and then I'm going to do Command Shift Z to sort of redo. Right, so you can see what happened. My pink path did go back one level, but that didn't really make much of a difference to me visually. I actually need to send it back again in order to see something change. And now it's beneath this path, right? So ultimately I needed to put it beneath this path. In my layer panel, I could actually pick up that little blue dot. Okay, or not the little blue dot, it used to be the little blue dot. I could actually pick up my path itself and drag it to change what I'm going to call, and what most people call, the stacking order of the layers. So the stacking order of the layers is essentially what's on the top and what's on the bottom, and whatever's on the top is the one that's closest to us visually. Now I could also choose Object Arrange, Send to Back. Send to Back means put it all the way behind everything. In this case, that includes the image. So here you can see it's still selected, so I can see the sort of outline of where it's selected, but the image is covering it. So I actually wouldn't want it to go all the way back. I probably, in all reality, I probably want it to be in the front, but let's say I wanted it to be there, I could pick up my layers and drag it there. You also may sort of do the same thing in terms of creating a background color. So right now the background is white. Let's say I had finished this whole thing. Let's say I wanted to have like a background here and a background there. So maybe I want this whole piece to have a background color, and I'm going to just do something a little bit different. I'm going to pull my pink foreground to the front in my fill area, and instead of using my color panel or my color fill, this time around, I'm going to choose my color using the eyedropper tool. So with the eyedropper tool, I can pick up a color that's in the image. And you can just click, you can click and drag your mouse around even, but you can just kind of click until you feel like you got the color you were looking for. So I was sort of looking for one of those dark reds, so that works for me, that's fine. I'm going to use that. I'll go back to my selection tool, make my rectangle pretty much cover the image. And then if I would use Arrange, Send to Back, it will go behind the image. So then I could use Arrange, Bring Forward. Bring Forward would just bring it forward one level. So maybe I would do that to figure out my composition and have my compositional space. And then if I wanted, you don't have to do this, but if you wanted to have the whole entire thing be on some color besides white, you could maybe do something like this. Let's give it some other color. And then again, Object Arrange, Send to Back. This time, Send to Back is actually for real what I wanted to do. Okay, so at this point, I feel like I've covered most of the things that I would, really like you to see for the chapter. The last thing is just when you save as. So for the most part, during the semester, I'm going to ask you to save as your first initial dash your last name. And so in this case, for me, it would be xborough. And I always want you to save your native file. Adobe Illustrator or .ai is the native file, so I'll save that. You will have some options here. You probably can click right through this without worrying. The only thing you might want to possibly, I don't know if worry is the right word, but worry about is the version. So if you know you're going to be working on a prior version, you can save in a prior Adobe Illustrator version. Like if you're working in an open lab and you know that you have CS5 at home, or CS3, I think there's someone in this class who has CS3, you can go ahead and save in CS3 format so that you'll be able to open this file on those older versions of Illustrator. If you're just going to work with the download that you have right now for the whole 5 weeks that we're together, you can just leave this alone and press OK, and that'll be fine. So that's my native format that has been saved. And then I'm going to do one more time, File, Save As. I'm going to leave the name exactly the same. I'm not going to touch my name. I'm just going to change my format to PDF. And then I'll press Save. Notice that I now have, this is my second file, xborough.pdf. And I'll save my Adobe PDF. Again, I've got the PDF dialog box. There are some possible options that I might look at. I'm not going to worry about them for now. Later we'll talk about marks and bleeds and compression, but for now I'm just going to press Save. And it will take one moment and then I'll have my PDF saved.